Hi, guys, it's your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio, and I am back again today to, tell you about everything that you should be doing. First of all, a very good morning to you, and I'm super excited to be here, and I'm super excited to host you today as well. And if you have any questions, if you have any message or shout outs, not shout outs, but shout outs to ask me questions, or if you have any opinions that you want to share with me, make sure you text me on 07852473473. Now, I'm super excited to be here today, and I will be talking to you about hustle culture right now. Okay. And that's why I'll be here to talk to you about to hustle or not to hustle. Yes, I know I just switched the words around with the famous Shakespeare quote, but Hamlet actually. But I switched those words around because the hustle culture is very real, and it's currently happening at a really fast rate right now. So it's something that's really important. So I thought I had to tell you about it. So I'm gonna get right into it. If you just tune in, it's me, Sarah, but I'm just gonna get into hustling culture, right? So obviously, every time you're on your social media, every time you're out, you have people, you see posts, you see, when you're scrolling down your social media, you see posts, and then when you meet people, you see their t-shirts, whatever it is. This word hustle always keeps, you always keep seeing this word hustle, right? So every time you're on social media, you'll always see quotes that says, don't stop when you're tired, but stop when you're done, or let your hustle be louder than your words. Now, hustling it's all good as long as you know how to maintain how much you hustle, right? Now, what I mean when I say this is currently, right now, hustling has become this sort of mania. Everyone is talking about it. Everyone wants to be a part of it, right? But the thing is, the reason hustling actually exists right now is because we live in a very competitive capitalistic world, right? So obviously, we need to hustle. And when you think about it, it actually makes a lot of sense, because when you live in a world that's so capitalistic, when everyone is so competitive, you have no choice but to be a part of this culture, to be on the top of your game, so you can also be a part of this whole competition, that you can earn enough money and you can prove your worth, and define yourself based on the hustle culture, right? And if I were to simply put this, or if I were to exactly tell you what exactly hustle culture is, it's basically this fast-paced environment where you have to work extremely long hours, and there's this restless sense of striving for a goal, right? And sometimes this goal is something that's completely not unachievable, but rather it is something that is so hard to achieve, because you're constantly struggling, you're constantly trying to sort of fit into these long working hours, you're constantly trying to have a high rate of productivity, actually, and it gets really hard. So that is what hustle culture is. And according to this survey that was actually conducted, they found out that a person who is a part of this hustle culture has an average of 100 working hours. So the minimum working hours are actually 40 hours. Imagine having an average of 100 working hours. That means you have to work 60 hours more than the rest of the people who actually have this 40 minimum working hours. And uh, and the thing is, even though you work these long hours, it doesn't always mean that there is higher productivity. Okay, because even though you're working long hours, that doesn't mean you have a level of productivity, because the longer hours you work, that means the more time you're actually, so you spend being stressed out and tired, that you aren't really as productive when you're working minimal hours, right? So that is what that is. And a part of the survey actually found out that people who are part of hustle culture actually found that working overtime was something completely normal. And they also said that they feel guilty if they don't work extra hours, and they regularly work on the weekends. So you can see how detrimental this culture is becoming, because you're constantly motivating people, or telling people that working overtime is fine, that you have to work overtime. That's how you sort of prove your self-worth in the workplace. And that if you and they're also promoting this whole culture of coming to work really early and leaving really late. And what if you actually think about it, you're not necessarily promoting something that is good, right? Because even if you come to work early and leave work late, we're not talking about the amount of work that's done. It doesn't matter if you spend 15 hours in your office but your productivity is 10%, because that's not going to help anyone. And that's what this whole hustle culture is about, and it is a huge problem because everyone in this generation, they're so focused on it, and there's a lot of endorsement, there's a lot of promotion, there's a lot of glorification when it comes to this hustle culture. Everyone's talking about it, everyone wants to be a part of it, and they think it's like the best thing ever, you know. The mantra of all the people working living in 2021 is, the hustle don't stop, or similar, things along those similar things along those lines, right? That is what this hustle culture is about, and I wanted to talk to you about it today because I feel like it's taking a lot of time from us, right? And it is making us focus on these really it's making us focus on these things that aren't really important, but it's also making us sacrifice our health, our mental health, our family lives, everything, everything that you work so hard for, everything that you live for, just to be a part of this hustle culture. And when it comes to, even the promotion of hustle culture, there are many ways in which you do it. So the thing is, hustling isn't bad, but the way it is portrayed right now is right. Because when I say hustling isn't bad, I mean, it's okay for you to go to your office. It's okay for you to work a few extra hours. That's okay. But working extra hours every day, working overtime on the weekends, and having an average of 100 hours really does not make sense, because you're exploiting yourself, you're suffering, it's true, and you're constantly, trying to act like you're not. You're not suffering from it, which is not really true. We are suffering from it. You're suffering from it, and you're having to face a lot of drawbacks because of that. And that's why it's so important that when it comes to this hustle culture, that you constantly focus on what exactly that you want to do, right? And when I what I mean when I say this is, we all have a purpose in life, we all want to achieve this goal. When you wake up every day, or the epitome of, being alive is actually figuring out what your purpose is. It's when you find that purpose, you feel fulfilled, you know what you're doing. It's when you find that purpose in life. So obviously hustling then plays a huge part, because if hustling is now going to dictate what kind of working hours you should spend, how you should what kind of working hours you should spend, how you should spend your free time, and if the hustle culture is dictating what kind of work life you should have, then you really need to take a step back and think about it and decide whether it's actually healthy or not. Because look, it's not bad to work towards your goal, it's not bad to, work hard for your dreams, but there's also something called working too hard. Too much of anything is not good, right? And that is what hustle culture has currently become. It's become too much, and that's why it's really, really important for you to actually, take a few steps back, rethink if your working environment is like this, and actually, try to talk to someone about it and try to get out of this really toxic mentality that is currently there when it comes to hustle culture. So let's talk about how hustle culture is promoted, right? Because I see this happening everywhere. Every time I'm on Instagram, there's so many people posting quotes, stories, and even, giving like, those Instagram live videos that happen, talking about hustling, why it's important to wake up really early in the morning, and dedicate so much of your time and work tirelessly without a break. And every time I see it, sometimes I feel so I feel like I'm not doing something with my life. I feel like I don't have enough purpose, because I'm seeing all these people around me, posting stories, even posts talking about hustle culture, talking about how good they're doing. But I also see a lot of them suffering, and I am thinking to myself, do I actually want to go through this? Do I actually want to put myself in such a situation and suffer so much just because I can achieve this dream? Do I want to give up all of my, my physical health, my mental health? Is it really worth it, right? So that's what I feel. So obviously, one of the first things that is, important when it comes to how hustle culture is promoted is actually social media. Everyone uses it. We all, every time we're free, every time we have a few minutes of free time, you would just scroll down your phone, right? You would look at Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is, even Twitter. You would just scroll down your phone. That's what we do. We live in a digital age. Everything we do is based on, digitization. We are constantly on computers, we're constantly on social media, because a lot of jobs nowadays also have social media pages. So there's a lot of social media analysis, etc., that goes into, these businesses. So you're constantly on social media and you always see people posting it. So then what happens when you're constantly seeing people posting it is it appeals to your subconscious and you start thinking, hey, maybe there's something wrong with me. Why am I not a part of this culture? I should probably be a part of this culture. And that is what hustle culture does to people. Now, another way hustle culture is actually promoted is through motivational quotes. Now, look, I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's okay to have motivational quotes once in a while. My mom always sends me motivational quotes, and that's okay. It's okay to motivate yourself, but always motivating yourself, telling yourself, look, there's something called over motivation, right? And this is what happens when you're constantly telling yourself, oh, it's okay if you don't sleep tonight because you need to do this. At the end of the day, even if you don't get sleep for the next few days, that's okay, because you're going to achieve a bigger end goal. And that is really not the case. When you actually think about it, some of these things are really detrimental to the way we see society, and to even the way we think. And that's why it's so detrimental, that you start rethinking yourself, you start rethinking your purpose, and you sort of have this whole identity crisis of whether what you're doing is actually enough. Okay. And that's what hustle culture does to people. Now, stay tuned, because I'll be right back with you on hustle culture and its effects, because I have so much to tell you about. But it's time for me to head into a break right now.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh. So that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Ladies who ask, hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful? I mean, hey, you can always have something up on your sleeve. I mean, got me thinking, you want to stand out. Why do you want to stand out though so much, especially with these kind of shirts when you're riding? There must be a purpose behind it, right?
Well, when you say a purpose, Nick, what I do, I wear the shirts, mainly, one, because they're nice and bright, so they make me visible, especially if I'm riding on the road.
Okay. Yeah, that's very important, right? Because you want cars, yeah.
Very important. And also, like, people see me in, like, calves, and perhaps I shouldn't be saying this on here, I suppose, but in the bar afterwards.
All right.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh, so that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Ladies who ask, hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful? I mean, hey, you can always have something up on your sleeve. I mean, you look like a guy who would do.
You know me too well. You know me too well, Nick.
It's your girl Sarah back on the Kaleidoscope, and I'm super excited to be here because I have a lot to tell you about hustle culture and what it is right now. If you're just standing in, we're talking about hustle culture. We're talking about how it can be detrimental and what kind of purposes it actually serves in this day and age, and what kind of impact it has on the future. And that's what we're talking about today. And also, if you have any messages, thoughts you would like to share, even opinions, you can text me on 0785 852 473 and get in touch with me. And I will be so excited to share your opinion and my opinion too. But let's get back into it because we were talking about motivational quotes, right? Now, motivational quotes is something that we obviously see a lot on social media. People send it to us, our parents send it to us. But I was telling you about how sometimes those motivational quotes can actually be really detrimental, right? Especially when it comes to these instances where we're constantly undervaluing ourselves, when we're constantly thinking about if what we're doing is actually worth it. So that's what those motivational quotes what kind of detrimental effect those motivational quotes have in this day and age. Now, another way in which hustle culture is promoted is obviously through your friends and your family. Because how many times have you actually had your parents or even your friends tell you, hey, why aren't you doing anything, go do something? And sometimes even the mere fact of taking a rest, taking a break has to be something productive. And I've always asked this question from people when they ask me if what I was doing had any gain. And I would always ask them, why do you always have to gain something from whatever you're doing? Why can't you just enjoy what you're doing? Why does it always have to have, an outcome? It doesn't always have to be that, relaxation isn't about learning a new skill, reading a book isn't about learning a new habit. You know what I mean? Because those things aren't always they're always going to help you just because you learn a new skill. I mean, that's cool. It's cool to learn a new skill, but all whenever you spend your free time, it doesn't actually have to be because you want to learn something. You can really just take a nap, or you can just cook something. Doesn't have to have it doesn't have to have an outcome, is what I'm trying to say. So what I meant when I say when I said that your friends, your family even promotes hustle culture, is sometimes your friends have their own businesses, they have their own brands, and that's nothing bad. We all have our own businesses. We have our workplace, but sometimes we don't have our business, we work for someone else, but there's nothing wrong with that as well, right? But the thing is, when they're constantly talking about their business, when they're constantly saying how much of work they put into it, and how much of hours actually, about how many hours they spend doing a certain task, it really makes you question, am I being productive? Now, here's the thing though, people who are part of this hustle culture actually really really like to gloat, or boast about how many hours they spend, or whatever the tasks they have, how many tasks they have, and how much of work they have. That is something they really like to do, which is quite ironic, because if you think about it, if you have so much of tasks, then why are you even on social media posting about it? You know what I mean? There's a lot of hypocrisy there, because if you're so busy and you have absolutely no free time, then why are you spending time trying to tell everyone about the workload you have, or how many tasks you have? It's quite ironic, right? But the thing is, when your friends are constantly talking about this, constantly telling you about their business, telling you about how many customers they have, their income, then it sort of starts getting to you as to whether you're working hard enough, whether what you're doing actually has an impact. And that's why it's so hard sometimes. That's why you're constantly not feeling that great about yourself. That's a reason why we don't really feel productive, because when we're on social media, we see so many people doing so many different things, and it, in your head, it just makes you feel like you're not enough. But the thing is, everything that happens on social media isn't true either, right? Because we are constantly spending so much of time on social media, we've trained, or rather we've programmed our brains to think that everything that people post is true, but that's not actually the truth. Sometimes people actually post things to sort of hide the truth, to pretend, or to even act like they're having a perfect life, when really no one's life is perfect. You can't have a perfect life. perfection in a life doesn't really exist. Sure, you can have money, you can have luxury, you can have comfort, but that doesn't mean your life is perfect. You will always have problems, you will have struggles. That doesn't mean that your life will ever become perfect, if you know what I mean, right? And another thing that actually promotes this hustle culture is actually, movements itself. Now, there are movements called Thank God It's Monday, where they're always about the hustle. It's about, waking up in the morning, looking at your phone, drinking a cup of coffee, getting your coffee on the way to work, and focusing, working long hours. You know what I'm talking about. You've been involved in that too, and so have I. But it's really, really detrimental to your health, because sometimes even on your weekends you want to work. Who wants to work on the weekends? The reason weekends exist is for you to take a break. It's not for you to work on the weekends, it's for you to take a break on the weekends. It's literally called weekends, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So when it comes to how this hustle culture is promoted, it's actually really, really detrimental. And apart from these movements, there's a lot of advertising that also promotes this, right? And this is really important, because advertising works in a way where you sort of influence the customers' minds. You influence their minds to want this, to create this want for themselves, right? That's how advertising works. So when you're seeing this hustle logo, if you know what I mean, it's almost a logo right now, hustle culture, a part of the hustle. You have hustle printed everywhere, on books, on caps, on t-shirts, on mugs, on bags, whatever it is printed everywhere, right? And when you're constantly seeing the word hustle, then you start beginning to think, am I, or rather you start to think, am I actually, hustling enough? Am I a part of this hustle culture? What exactly is hustle, right? And the other thing is, there are idols of this hustle culture. And if you know and if you are aware of, hustle culture, and if you've been a part of it, or if you are currently a part of it, you know that there is a lot of people who always talk about, how it's so amazing to wake up early in the morning, work till late at night, and spend like 18, 15, 16, 17 hours a day just working, right? And they're always like, oh, I'm in a position to tell you this, because I have been there, I have done that, and I am better at it than you are. So this is why you should hustle, this is why you should work hard, because you can achieve your dreams and your aspirations, right? But the thing is, the sad truth behind it is that in the UK, almost 600,000 people suffer from work related stress, anxiety, and depression. Okay. And now, if you add this whole hustle culture to it, you can imagine how much it's going to get worse, right? These numbers will double. These numbers will double. They will have even harder. They will have an even harder time dealing with this whole hustle culture, and trying to attempt, or rather attempt, in creating something good, in trying to be productive. And that is why hustle culture is so detrimental right now, because it's forcing a lot of people, not directly, it's indirectly forcing a lot of people to make these changes, to start thinking of themselves as to whether they're doing enough, right? And that's not good, because especially when you're working, especially also in the middle of a pandemic, when you're working, the amount of stress and anxiety that you have is different, because we're currently not in a normal condition. We're not in a normal situation, because a pandemic is a normal is when you can go to work every day. You don't have these, you don't have a lockdown, you don't have safety precautions and whatnot that you need to take. That is what normal is. But currently, that is not the situation. Things are so different right now. So obviously it's completely new. And when you're trying to be a part of this culture in a setting where everything is new and everything is something we haven't experienced before, it's really hard. Okay, so this is why I'm gonna tell you about why hustle culture is actually quite bad. Okay, now I spoke about how it's promoted, what hustle culture is, and what kind of impact it has on the society. But right now I'm gonna tell you about why it is bad. If you're just tuning in, I'm Sarah, and we're talking about hustle culture on the Kaleidoscope. If you have any questions or if you have any opinions, thoughts that you want to share with me, you can text me on 078 and I will, answer them. I will even share them on the show so we can have, or rather, we can exchange our opinions and we can talk about what is actually good and what is bad and how it will help us as human beings in this day and age. So to move on to why hustle culture is so bad. Now, there's a lot of consequences and risks when it comes to hustle culture. And what I'm talking about is when you're hustling, hustling means you're constantly working. You have to work long hours. But sometimes, even though you work long hours, you don't have high levels of productivity. And just because you're constantly working, that doesn't mean you get instant results as well, right? So when you are constantly working, when you are always at office, when you have no free time, that causes you to burn out. And burning out is something that happens to everyone once in a while, but for people who hustle, it's way worse, right? Because when you burn out, you're tired, and when you're tired, it obviously affects your productivity. You haven't had enough sleep, you have no time to relax, and there's a lot of unnecessary stress, right? The whole thing about hustle culture is there's a lot of unnecessary stress, there's a lot of unnecessary pressure, and there's way too many deadlines that people have to, that people have to make it, all these deadlines, they have to sort of make it to the deadline way way too many deadlines that they have to make it to because of everything that is currently being in this environment. So a lot of this hustle culture actually happens in very technologically, motivated fields, right? And I'm talking about IT, that kind of field, those kind of fields, right? Because those people, those kind of jobs, they have to put in a lot of extra work and they have to put in a lot of long hours, right? And that's why this overworking or the burnout actually, it makes it really hard for them because they have way too many deadlines and they have way too many things that they have to deal with while also working. Okay, because then you actually begin to think, do you live to work or do you work to live? Because normally we work to live. We're not born to, work every minute and every hour of our day. We're humans. We have normal, human needs. And those are things like eating, sleeping, relaxing, hanging out with your friends. But if you're constantly working, you don't actually have time to do that, right? And when you have these way too many deadlines and you have way too much stress, that it makes it really hard for you to actually adjust to this environment. It makes it really hard for you to be more creative, be more innovative in that kind of environment. And especially because we're living in or rather we're working in companies that constantly want innovation, that constantly want creativity, then you actually need to stop and think about it and decide as to whether this hustle culture actually helps people in being productive or not, right? Because if people are constantly stuck and they're constantly working and thinking of, is the work I do enough, am I working long enough, and even if they feel guilty about not putting in extra hours, that really tells you something about hustle culture, right? Because look, we've all worked extra hours, we've all been there, but we haven't worked extra hours the way some people are right now. I don't want to spend 24 hours of my day working. No one wants to do that. It's stressful, it's tiring, and it's also really exhausting. Like every time you come home, you're drained, you have no energy to do other things, and you're easily stressed out. You get angry for like the smallest thing, and that's not something that you want to have as a person. You don't always want to be negative, you don't always want to be sad and cynical and pessimistic. You know what I mean? No one wants to be like that. But that is the kind of people that hustle culture is making in this day and age, because you're overworking people so much that they have no choice but to shut themselves down, to sort of push people away, and even focus on just work itself, and not really contribute to work the way they used to, not have that exact same level of creativity or even high level of creativity or even productivity, right? That's what hustle culture is doing. But stay tuned, because I have a lot more to talk to you about hustle culture, but I'll be right back after this break, so make sure you stay tuned. And I have so many interesting things coming your way, so just gotta go wait for this break to finish, and then we can get back to it.
And climb Mount Everest. That is one of that's in my bucket list. You're laughing, but that is the facts right there. I'd love to do that. That is something I'm looking forward to do, hopefully.
Climb Everest.
Mount Everest.
Yeah.
Okay, not the very tip of Mount Everest, maybe the base camp at least.
They're talking about mental health. Well, if you went out and got some exercise in the fresh air, that would improve your mental health. It will make you feel better.
That's true. That is true. I wholeheartedly agree. But then for some people, it's how do you find the motivation to, especially when it comes to riding a bicycle, to do it again and again and again and again? It's a cycle that you have to be used to. How do you do it? What makes you wake up in the morning and decide, hey, I'm going to pick my bike up today. I'm going to cycle. What makes you want to do that?
What makes me want to do that?
Yeah. What do you like? What could you give listeners, like people listening in right now? What kind of tip could you give them?
Well, the first tip I would give them, if you haven't tried it before, try it. It can open up new horizons. It'll make you fitter. It will definitely make you fitter. Cycling is one of the best forms of aerobic exercise you can do.
It sounds like, if you think about it, yeah, it sounds like great fun. Because what essentially you're trying to say is also at the same time, when you, if you look at it from this perspective, with regards to mental health, especially when you look at it with mental health, this is another way to fight it. I feel like you go outside, you meet more people, you interact with, socially, you'll interact with more people, and you're keeping fit, you're making connections, you're breathing in the good and exhaling the bad. I feel like that's a great thing right there.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got a better way with words than I have, I'll tell you. But you're quite right. What you say there, you're quite right.
I've been doing this for quite some time. Hey, you'll get the hang of it.
Yeah, I've been doing it for about 10 minutes now, so yeah.
That I can never really understand people staying in one room the whole day when you can have the world to see. I am a traveler. I travel. I love traveling. Traveling is just one of the things I do. And on top of my bucket list, it was, to one time, hopefully when I get there, go to Nepal and climb Mount Everest. That is one of that's in my bucket list. You're laughing, but that is the facts right there. I'd love to do that. That is something I'm looking forward to do, hopefully.
Climb Everest.
Mount Everest. Okay, not the very tip of Mount Everest, maybe the base camp at least.
Base camp, yeah.
At least.
Would you be able to cycle there?
Oh.
This is the Kaleidoscope with Sarah, and I'm here to tell you about hustle culture and the pros and cons of hustle culture and what exactly is currently happening in the world with hustle culture and how much of our time it's actually taking. So if you're just tuning in, I was talking about the negative effects of hustle culture, or rather the detrimental effects of hustle culture, and how it's actually beginning to get to us and affect us in a lot of ways. And if you also want to share your opinion, if you have any messages or thoughts you would like to get across, text me on 07852473473, and I can hopefully share that opinion, and I can share my opinion as well, and we can have a discussion on your opinion, whatever it is related to this, or even if it's something else, even if it's something that you want me to talk about, just text me on 07852473473, and you can be a part of this show as well. So, getting back to the detrimental effects of hustle culture, um, another huge impact of it is it absolutely leaves no time for personal relationships. Now, the thing is, we're human beings, and that means we can't be alone for a long time, right? We constantly need to socialize, and even if you think you're an introvert, which I think I am, but also if you think you're an introvert and you're completely fine staying at home all the time, that you don't even mind the lockdown, especially me. I love staying at home. So, I always, every time there's a lockdown, I'm just like, oh, yes, I can stay at home. I don't have to go out and meet people. Even if you're an introvert like me, the thing is, after a while, it gets really tiring. After a while, you want to go out and you want to meet your friends, you want to meet your family, you want to maintain those relationships, right? And especially because we live in an age that we're constantly working, we also find it so hard to actually have time for other people. And even when we do have time for other people, we tend to make a half-hearted effort, which means that we don't necessarily put in a lot of effort into our relationships, into whether it's platonic relationships or romantic relationships, we don't put a lot of effort into it. And because of that, we tend to, lose those people, we tend to lose those relationships a lot, right? And then it what we're always, then we begin to think that, maybe it's something wrong with us, maybe it's something wrong with them. But simply the fact is, we're so busy, we don't have time for relationships, we don't have time for friendships, right? And that's what I mean that when I say that there's no time for personal relationships, right? Because forget about other people. Okay, maybe you don't need to hang out with other people, maybe you're completely fine being by yourself, maybe you're like that. Sometimes I'm like that too, and that's completely normal. Okay, but say if you're like that, then what about your leisure time? What about having time to relax? What about doing something you love? You don't have that either, right? Because when you're trying to fill in every free minute that you have with another task, then you have no time to relax, you have no time to enjoy your life, you have no time to sit back, take a break, and look at everything you've accomplished. So what is the point of life if you're constantly working, you're slaving away, at this job that isn't even making you feel fulfilled, you're suffering mentally and physically because of it? What is the point of that? What is the point of that kind of job? What is the point of that kind of culture? What is the point of that kind of mentality? And that's why it's really important to take a step back and really think about how this is affecting you, how it's affecting the rest of your life as well. Because what if because have you ever thought, what if you actually quit your toxic job? You leave this whole hustle culture, you're able to get out of it, but when you do get out of it, you have no friends, you have no, familiar relationships, you have no friendships, you have no relationships, and you're all alone. And that's when you sort of begin to realize this is what hustle culture has done. This is how much it has changed us. This is how much it has, put me in a cave, if I may. They've basically isolated you from the rest of the world, that even when you finally do manage to get out of this, toxic culture, you you're all alone. You have nowhere to turn to, you have no one to talk about that experience. Now, I was reading some research recently about people who are actually a part of this hustle culture, and when a lot of them actually realized that what was happening to them was toxic, when they actually left their jobs and they decided, hey, I'm going to do something different, I'm going to get out of this, they realized that by the time they had already left, that the impact it had on them was so huge, right? And it had caused so many problems in them, both physically and emotionally, that for them to actually rejuvenate, go back to their normal selves, they had to spend 6,000 US dollars on this place that specifically caters to helping people who suffer from burnout for an entire month, right? And the thing is, then you begin to think, look, what's the point of earning all that money, or what's the point of sacrificing your mental health, your family, everything you love and care about, for this work culture that doesn't really appreciate the amount of work you're putting in? Because look, it's completely fine for you to work long hours once in a while, that's normal, we all do that. But if you're constantly working so much, and you're thinking to yourself, is it really worth it? Then it's not. Because like I said before, you don't live to work, you work to be alive, you work to provide for whatever you want. Sometimes it's necessity, sometimes with time when you're working, you want to earn a higher salary, you want to earn a higher salary so you can afford things, you can have a little bit of luxury for yourself. That's why you work, right? But is it really worth it if you're earning money but you have to sacrifice everything else for it? Because in my opinion, it's actually not worth it at all, because I wouldn't want to sacrifice my mental health, my physical health, and all these amazing relationships and friendships I have with people, my friends, my family, everyone out there. I don't want to sacrifice all of that for a job that is probably not even going to be that beneficial for me. Another detrimental effect of hustle culture is actually how it affects mental health, right? Now, when you're constantly working, you tend to be stressed, you tend to be depressed, you have a lot of anxiety, and you tend to show a lot of depressive symptoms. And that's actually because you're thinking about, all the work you put in and how it's not really making you happy. Now, the thing is, people, we all think, happiness isn't such a huge thing in our lives, but the thing is, it is. And you know that quote that says money can't buy happiness, but people are always like, yeah, but money can buy me food and food makes me happy. Sure, food makes you happy, but what about your actual happiness, right? Food, I would say that food doesn't make you happy. It gives you a temporary like pleasure. It makes you feel good for a while, but that doesn't mean that food is going to keep you happy forever, because if that was the case, I wouldn't be sad at all. I would be happy every day of my life because I get to eat good food every day. So then I wouldn't actually be sad, or I wouldn't be going through any of these mental illnesses like anxiety or even depression and stress, right? But the thing is, that's not what it is. Money can't buy you happiness. It actually can't. Money will help you find other things that will make you happy for a temporary time period, but that's really that's what it is. It's not going to make it any better than that. So if you are going to be in a job that is constantly requiring so much of mental labor, if it is requiring so much of your time and your energy, then you have to really take a step back and think about it. Because when you're constantly working and you have no time to relax, when there's no freedom, when you don't have any leisure time, when you can't meet your friends and family, that actually really decreases your productivity, right? It doesn't help you focus. You're constantly sad, and the thing is, when you're sad, when you have depression, when you have anxiety, you can't really work. So then what's the point? Because you get these mental illnesses because of your job, but because of these mental illnesses you can't perform at your job, so you lose your job anyway, right? That isn't a win-win situation. No one wins in that. So that actually isn't the best way to go about it. That isn't going to help you, because it's the situation that caused your mental health to fall is also now making you lose your job. So you're losing both. You're losing your mental health and your job, and that's not what you want to go through as someone, because losing your mental health is something that's really really heartbreaking to watch. And even if you're experiencing it yourself, it's really sad, and it really takes a lot out of you when you're suffering from these mental illnesses. And keeping mental illnesses aside, another thing that is affected by the hustle culture is actually your physical health. So obviously, your emotional and your physical health kind of go hand in hand. When you're depressed, I mean, okay, a common symptom of, or rather, a common thing that you see in people who are depressed is they have no motivation, they have no will to, do something. And that's like, when you have depression, you don't want to wake up in the morning, you don't want to get out of bed. So there is a connection between your mental health and your physical health, right? So in a research that was done for people who are part of this hustle culture, it was showed that people who are part of this actually had increased heart attacks and an increased rate of blood pressure. And this was just people who were working for over 50 hours a week. But you understand that if the average person who works in a hustling environment is actually an average of 100 hours, then they definitely have way much more health risks than people who work for over 50 hours, right? So when you're constantly putting yourself at risk, when you're constantly putting your health at risk, you're putting yourself at risk, you're putting your health at risk, and you're also putting your family at risk, right? Because what if you are the sole, if you're the breadwinner in the family, say you have a family and you're the one that provides for your family, and something happens to you, then what about the rest of your family? How would they survive? How would they be able to sort of bounce back from a situation like that? And that's why it's so important to think about your emotional and your physical health when you get a new job, when you're working in a new environment, because you need to make sure that you are also healthy while you're working. Okay, and while keeping all these things in mind, you need to make sure that you aren't also, that you aren't programmed by these notions and these, norms that exist in society. And what I mean by this is, when you're on social media and you see people living perfect life, okay, the best example for this is actually, whenever you're on social media, you see those things called perfect relationships. But perfect relationships don't exist, because nobody is perfect. We're human. That's the whole thing, right? We're imperfect and we're human, and that's why we can't ever be perfect at anything. Even if you have 50 years of experience in the entertainment industry, or you have 35 years of experience in the food industry, you will still go wrong at one point. You are not always perfect. We all make mistakes, right? And that's what I mean when I say nothing is perfect. Even perfect relationships aren't perfect. What you post on social media as a perfect relationship isn't actually perfect. It could be an abusive relationship for all you know, but you would know about it because that person isn't going to be particularly open about it, right? So obviously, when you see these things on social media, you tend to be dictated by it. You tend to think, okay, this is what perfect is. This is the kind of life I should live. So if this is what hustle is, you will begin to think this is the kind of life I should live. But that's not true. Don't ever be fooled by social media, right? But I have a bit more to get to on this topic, so make sure you stay tuned for that. But it's time to head into a break, so let's do that right now.
Again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, you've had one to forget, God, there'd be an inquest. Me, why did you reject my son? Oh, I haven't rejected your son.
I want to talk about, how the generation gap, has how much it's changed, especially when you check the youth nowadays in comparison, to people back in the day.
I'd say when I was younger, it was more disciplined. Not now.
In comparison to now.
Not at all. Not now. The way things are nowadays, the younger generation, you seem that they can't accept the word no. If that makes sense.
They can't accept rejection, essentially, is all you're trying to say.
Yeah, they can't accept the word no. So if you, how did I do? Or you didn't do very well. And they get upset, and when I was a youngster, my father used to say to me, because I used to be sport mad when I was very young, well, I still am sport mad, but like participating in different sports. And if I had a bad game, for example, he'd say to me, you had one to forget. That's it.
Your dad sounds like a smart guy. I mean, yeah, that's the real fact of the matter, yeah.
You know, he'd say to me, you had one to forget. Get over it. And that was it. So I'd dust myself down and do it again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, you've had one to forget, God, there'd be an inquest. An inquest. I mean, why did you reject my son? Oh, I haven't rejected your son. Or daughter. I've just told them that they need to buck their ideas up.
That's the truth right there. I mean, if you think about it, if you check the generations, like right now in the US as well, I've seen a lot of these things as well. In the UK, you know, you get medals for participation. But what's the point? What are you trying to? Yeah, what's the point? Either you win or you lose. People are so afraid to put that whole notion of losing. You know, when it comes to right now, the generation gap is just crazy. You know how much. A lot has changed. Social media has taken control of our lives, and we don't even realize it anymore. We're crippled because of it.
That's absolutely right, Nick. Because, as you said, you know, nowadays it seems that you get rewarded for failure. You know, for the life of me, Nick, I can't get my head around that. Perhaps I'm just getting old and morbid. I don't know. I just can't get my head around how you could be rewarded for failure.
Hey, it's Sarah on the Kaleidoscope, back again to talk to you about toxic culture, or rather hustle culture, and how it is toxic and the kind of impacts it is currently having on people right now. Okay, so if you're not sure, we were talking about the detrimental effects of hustle culture a while back, but now we're going to talk about why hustle culture needs to stop, right? And hustle culture actually needs to stop because of so many things. But before I get into that, if you have any messages, opinions on hustle culture and what kind of what kind of impact it has on people, then just text me on 0785 2473 473. Okay, and you can share your opinion, and we could have a little chat about your opinion, and I can share my opinion as well, and I could probably tell you about it on our show as well. Now, also, if you have any other things that you would like me to talk about, then make sure you text me on the number and we can talk about it. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's get into why toxic, or rather hustle culture is so toxic, and why it needs to stop. Okay, now as I explained earlier, hustle culture is really toxic, and I showed that to you by telling you how it affected people and the kind of relationships they had with other people, and how it essentially, had a huge impact on their lives, had a huge impact on their relationships, and even caused people to burn out and have serious mental, health issues, right? Now the thing is, mental health hasn't been much of a topic since recently, right? A lot of people have been focusing on mental health. There has been more focus on the mental health since the pandemic, but mental health and focusing on it has been something quite recent, because for so long talking about mental health was a very taboo topic, and if you had problems, you were sort of just supposed to, be quiet and go through it, like move on from your problems, which isn't great advice, because you can't just move on from your problems. You need to solve your problems, right? So when it comes to hustle culture, again, it's one of those reasons. Sometimes when you're trying to get away from this, environment, when you go and say complain to human resources about how you have too much work, or your working hours are too long, or it's affecting your mental health, more often than not, the answer that you would get is, well, you're not fit for the challenge, you should probably leave, because this kind of job requires this amount of, dedication and commitment. So if you can't live up to it, then you should probably quit your job. And the thing is, this is happening at an alarming rate. A lot of people are wanting to quit their jobs because of hustle culture at an alarming rate. And it makes a lot of sense why HR would say that, even though they're not supposed to, because you can't find solutions for every single problem out there. So you would tell the easiest thing that, that comes to you, which is, you're working in a very challenged environment. You need to work in this environment. If you want to be a part of this environment, rather, you need to put in long hours, and you need to accept these challenges. You have to be, flexible and compatible with it. That is what they would say. And that is why it's getting really toxic, because if you're finding it so hard to even, quit the job, if that is the kind of, if that is the kind of explanation they're going to give to you about why you aren't suitable at the job, then you can begin to see how detrimental it is, right? And secondly, we're perpetuating this cycle of suffering and exploitation. We're glorifying it, and we're endorsing it, and we're telling them it's okay to perpetuate this. It's okay to, overwork people. It's okay if they go through stress and all these other illnesses, and, even physically, even if they're not good, that's okay, because at the end of the day, they work long hours, they get the work done, and therefore we maintain hustle culture, and we are able to somehow, increase our profit to have a greater revenue and whatnot, right? So obviously, when you're perpetuating a cycle that is so toxic, it gets really hard to break. So when you're trying to break away from this mentality, when you're trying to break away from this mentality, when you're trying to get people to actually see the kind of toxic mentalities they have been in, when you're trying to get them to seek help, and even maybe, quit the kind of jobs that have this kind of culture, it is really hard when people are glorifying it and endorsing it. And it actually reminds me of this time when I was doing this poem back when I was in school, and I used to do literature. It was called War is Kind, and they that and basically he was criticizing how much the war was glorified by people, okay? Because the war back then was also very glorified, okay? And I'm not saying it's bad to want to fight for your country, it's not bad to be a patriot, but the thing is, when you glorify war, while you're glorifying war, you're actually not talking about all the after effects of war, right? And those are things like PTSD, unable the severe trauma that you have after the war, and all the other things that you need to go through. You're not talking about that. And that's the kind of thing hustle culture is. You're talking about how good it is, but we're not talking about the negative impacts of it. We're not talking about the detrimental effects, and we're not talking about how much it has affected other people and has actually, made their lives go from bad to worse. So if you're going to talk about it and glorify it, well, I believe that you need to also sort of, paint the whole picture to the people, give people the whole picture, instead of just painting one good side, and kind of forcing them, or indirectly, programming their minds to think that it's okay, right? And obviously, this is easier said than done. It's really easy for me to come here and tell you that hustle culture is bad, that it's toxic, and you need to break away from it. But obviously, a lot of things in life is easier said than done. So if you begin to realize these things, if you've begun to notice that this is the case, then you need to take those necessary steps. You need to, figure out what you want to do with your life, and decide whether it's actually worth it, right? Because after everything that's said and done, too much of anything is bad, right? And too much of anything is bad, even if it's too much of food, which I love, or even if it's too much of movies, it's bad, it's tiring, it's not the best feeling. You feel very overworked, you feel tired. That's not something that we want to go through all the time. So obviously, this is why hustle culture is so detrimental right now, because it's way too much. You're expecting way too much from people who are only supposed to have a maximum of 40 working hours. And that is why this mentality, this glorification of it, needs to stop, right? And the other thing is, we're human, we need to find fulfillment and purpose in life. And that's basically why we wake up every day, to find a purpose in life. This is what our existential crises are about. It's about finding that purpose in life. And if you can't find that purpose in life, then you begin to wonder, why are you actually alive? Why am I alive if I don't know what I'm supposed to do with my life, right? But the thing is, you can't actually find your purpose in life. You can't find that fulfillment in life if you're constantly working. If you have to, if you're filling in all of your free time with a task, if every free minute is dedicated or committed to doing something else, then you're not going to gain anything out of it. You're not going to find your purpose, and you're not even going to find that inner sense of fulfillment that we all want, right? So say you've been in this industry for a long time, you are finally retiring, but you know what, like, even after you retire, you don't feel that good, but you're just burdened with all that mental, stress and anxiety that you had to go through while you were at that job. And sometimes, when you're trying to break away from this, it's really hard, because a lot of people will have a lot of things to say, but at the end of the day, you have to do what is best for you. And that's why it's important that you work according to your own clock. You don't have to work according to someone else's clock, right? And what I mean by this is, hustling is about, achieving a certain set of goals at, when you're 20, or having a three-figure income, and having pets, and having a huge mansion like house when you're 30. If those are the kind of goals and things you need to achieve when you're 30, or when you're at a certain age, then you have to start thinking, why am I working according to the way society wants me to work? That's not how you should work. You should work according to your own clock. You have to grow at your own pace. And if you're rushing to do your job, if you're rushing to, finally do something, if you're rushing to make things work, it's okay to take a step back, and it's completely fine for you to take your own time. Well, it's the end of this topic right now, but stay tuned, because I'll be back again to talk to you about I'll be back here again to talk to you about productivity, and if 100% productivity exists, because we were just talking about the hustle culture. Okay, so stay tuned, but I will catch you again in a few minutes, so make sure you stay tuned.